Hello class, welcome back to the week 11 material, and today in this segment we're going to be looking at something known as file paths, or the concept of a file path. And here we're not actually going to be doing anything with the command line in this particular segment. This is more just to introduce the concept of a file path and how exactly they work. Just a basic overview of what exactly a file path is. File paths are how the computer knows where to look for a file. Basically, you spell out, using the computer's nomenclature, you spell out where exactly the computer should go looking for a particular file, where exactly is it located, something to that effect. And you can sort of think of this as sort of a tree. You have a directory at the very top, which is either your root directory or your home directory, and everything kind of branches out from there. So in this particular example, or on this particular example, we'll just use something sort of hypothetical. So here, again, I have the little tilde here to denote the home directory, and then here I've got other directories that are bolded, and then anything not bolded is just a regular file that we might go looking for. So you sort of think of this, the reason why this is called a file path is you kind of get the computer to draw out a path. You tell the computer where exactly to go in order to look for a file. So let's say that we want the computer to go look for something called a file called something.txt. And the way we would construct that file path is we begin at our starting location, which is the tilde here, and then within the home directory there should be a directory called regular files. That's what this represents here. So within the home directory, I have three different directories to choose from. I have three different paths I can take. One is regular files, the other is stuff, the other is Python files, and then within regular files, within that folder or directory, there should be a file called something.txt, which is what we're really after. So the first part of our path will involve going into the regular files directory. So we go in there, and then what contained within that directory is the file that we're interested in, something.txt. And then that's our ending point for the file path. And when you go to type this out in the command line, you'll see it written something like this. So here, this is how it would be notated in the command line. So if you had a command that takes in a file path, we'll look at some examples of that in the next segment, specifically the copy and move commands. But if you have a Linux command or a command line command that takes in a file path, this is basically how you would write it out. So you give it the starting point in the file path, which is the tilde, same as what we had up here, and then from there look for a directory called regular files, or a folder called regular files, which is right here, and then within that directory look for something called something.txt, or look for a file called something.txt, which is the ending point for our path. So that would be the full file path that leads to the file that we're interested in, which is something.txt. So let's take a look at another example. Let's say we're interested in the stuff.txt, which resides in a directory called more stuff, which resides in a directory called stuff, which resides in our home directory. So same idea as before, we just simply spell out the path that we want the computer to take to get from the starting point to the ending point. So again, start at our home directory. Then from there, we look for a directory called stuff. We go in there. And then within stuff, we look for, to get to the stuff.txt, we look for a directory called more stuff, because the stuff is contained within more stuff, this directory or folder right here, which is contained within the stuff directory, the stuff folder, which is contained within our home directory or folder. Again, I use those terms interchangeably because they're essentially the same thing. So from stuff, we go into more stuff. And then within more stuff, we should find the file that we're interested in, which is the stuff.txt. And then that's our ending point, and then the end result is this would be the file path to get us to the stuff.txt. So to sort of check your understanding, I'll go ahead and give you guys this exercise. So go ahead and, well, first I'll go ahead and spell out what exactly I want you to do. So that just involves me reading the text here. So as an exercise, go ahead and write out the file path to get to example.py, this file right here. And I'll go ahead and ask you to pause the video and at least attempt that. All right, so let's go ahead and see if the answer that you wrote down is correct. So again, like before, we started our home directory, which is denoted by the tilde, same starting point. Since this is the top directory, pretty much everything branches out from there, so everything is going to start from here, pretty much. And then from there, we look for a directory called Python files, because example.py is located within this directory, so we go looking for that. And this would be what our file path looks like so far. And then from there, we find the endpoint, example.py. And then that's our final answer right here. So that would go tilde / Python files / example.py, and that's the full file path that takes us to where we're interested in, where we want the computer to look for a file called example.py. So hopefully that sort of makes sense how exactly that works. I do want to go ahead and introduce a new concept. It's kind of built off of this, the idea of a local file path versus an absolute file path. The reason why I want to introduce that is because some people will use that just by choice, because one does offer one of those does offer advantages over the other in certain situations. So just to go ahead and define some of the terminology here, the local file path begins from the directory that you're currently in. So in the previous segment, we demonstrated how we can navigate from one directory to another. That's what we mean by from the directory you're currently in. So whatever directory you cd'd into or use the cd command on, whatever your directory is, that you can sort of think of that as your starting location for a local file path. And we'll look at an example of how exactly that works. And the absolute file path, which is what we've been working with so far, begins from either your home directory, again denoted by the tilde, or the server's home directory, also known as the root directory, which is denoted by the single /. And one of the advantages that the absolute file path offers is this will work no matter what. So it doesn't matter what directory you're currently in, the absolute file path will always take you where you want to go. Local file path won't necessarily do that, but the local file path is a lot more abbreviated and a lot simpler to work with in a lot of situations, which is why some people prefer it. So in case that you encounter local file path, absolute file path will work every time, but some people prefer the local file path because it's a lot more abbreviated, a lot more shorthanded. So we'll go ahead and look at some examples of the local file path, sort of kind of get your bearings. So in this example, we'll assume that we've cd'd into this directory called stuff. So let's just assume that we logged onto the server. We have a directory in our home directory called stuff, and we just cd'd into that. So we're currently in the stuff directory, and we're going to look at the file path, or the local file path. We'll actually look at both of them at the same time, but the first one we'll look at is the local file path to get from the stuff directory where we're currently in, and that's denoted by the little box here, to get from that directory to the stuff.txt. So this is our starting point, and within stuff, we're going to see a directory called more stuff. So that'll be the first part of our file path. And you'll notice that when we start to write the local file path, we don't start with the directory that we're currently in. Since we're already in the stuff directory, there's already an implication, it's already implied that we're starting at that location. So with the local file path, the first thing that we put at the beginning, that's the directory we want to go in from the current directory that we're in. So in this example, we're in a directory called stuff, and since more stuff is the start of our local path, that means look for a directory called more stuff within the current directory. So if you were to type an ls command while in the stuff directory, you should see a directory called more stuff, and that's the beginning of our local file path. And then from there, we go into the stuff.txt, and then since that's our ending point, that'll be our final result. So the local file path, starting from within the stuff directory, we go to more stuff, and then we go to the stuff.txt. And then the absolute file path is actually the exact same thing that we were working with earlier. So if we want the absolute file path to the stuff.txt, it's pretty much the exact thing that we had before. Start at the home directory, go into stuff, go into more stuff, and then go find the stuff.txt, and that's the endpoint for the file path. So you can see the absolute path takes a little bit more work if you want to type all that out, which is one of the reasons why some people prefer the local path. But the nice advantage of the absolute path is it will work no matter where you're at. This path will work no matter whether you're in Python files, whether you're in more stuff, whether you're in regular files, no matter where you are at in the server, this command will work for you if you want the computer to look for the stuff.txt. The local file path will not work for you, in fact, unless you're in the stuff directory, which is what we have in this example. So let's take a look at one last example that this time involves, let's say we're in the directory where the file is currently in. So we'll say we're in the more stuff directory, and the file that we're interested in is, again, the stuff.txt. So since the file is already in the directory we're currently in, or the folder that we're currently in, so let's say that we cd'd into stuff and then did the cd command again to more stuff, and we're currently in this directory. Since the file is already in the same directory as the directory we're currently in, the local file path to that is really simple. It's just the name of the file itself. Since this file is located in the same directory as more stuff, the local file path is just the file name. Now, if this weren't the case, like it was in the previous example, we had to go into another directory first, then go find the file at the end. So we had to give it a directory name first, then the / and the file name. But since this file name is in the same directory as the directory that we're currently in, again denoted by the little border on the box here, the local file path is really simple. It's just the name of the file. And again, this only holds if the file you're interested in is in the directory that you're currently in. Otherwise, you're going to have to add more stuff to it. And the absolute path, still the exact same thing as it was before. So I think that's going to do it for the file path segment. Hopefully this made sense to you. Next segment, we're going to be building on this information by looking at some commands that require you to know how file paths work. So again, if you have any questions, you have my email address, and you can also comment below. Otherwise, I will see you in the next segment.